So here I am at the Whole Earth Family Farm in my bus. This episode has been a long time coming. I originally wasn't even going to tell you guys this story, but something recently happened to me and my family which changed my mind on a lot of things. And that was the death of my youngest son, Adam Jeshuel. And he was a wonderful man, young man. And it kind of threw me for a loop. I haven't been inspired to do much for a while. It's been like almost 6 months. And the grief has subsided significantly. But it was partly because of that I decided to go ahead and tell you all this story. It's a very profound story. I call it the Great Vision because it changed my entire perspective on reality and history and religion and Judeo-Christianity in particular. And these days, almost everything I'm going to say has been expressed in one form or another in the past 20 years. So I'm not offering you any new information. However, in the context, I want you to understand that when I had this vision, it was in 1985. And in 1985, that was like almost 40 years ago. The times that we were living in were, if anybody was an adult during those times and compare them to this one, they would agree that those times were distinctly different than now in all kinds of different ways. The information that came to me in this great vision was new information for me. I mean, it was related to information that I already had, and a lot of people already had, but the extent of the information that was given to me was pretty new, and it was a shock to me. It was because it had me looking at things in ways that I never even thought I'd look at before. So, but before I tell you the story, I have to do a little disclaimer here. I mean, earlier on in some of my other episodes, I talked about, the rainbow gatherings and the use of psychedelic medicines. And in this case, there is definitely a use going on. And I will give some details on that because that in itself is some interesting information for some people, maybe not everybody. If you remember that I talked about LSD and how LSD was a great tool for learning and programming your mind to be able to do certain tasks. And I don't think it's really been explored as to what potentially it can do that except by the wrong people. And so I will reiterate that, pure LSD is definitely a programming tool that either you can use or somebody could use against you. That's a very important point that people need to understand. And that I also have to say that, even though I'm talking about my own use of psychedelics, I do not recommend their use to anyone who is not of the right heart and mind and spirit to begin with. I definitely discourage anybody thinking that they can take a psychedelic and go party and to have fun, because that's not why the Spirit gave us these things. The Spirit did not give us peyote and mushrooms and even LSD just to have a party. I'm sorry to break your bubbles, but that is the truth. Take it to the bank, ignore it at your peril. So I'm not endorsing the use of psychedelics, especially not in a controlled environment where you don't have somebody wise sitting there guiding you and making sure that nothing comes in that should not be there. So, having said that, I will begin the story, which does involve the use of psychedelics. But before the psychedelics, there was other things happening, and when the psychedelics weren't used. So I have to give you a little bit of a backstory. In one of my other episodes, I do believe it was in 1983, The last episode, I think, which was about the lightning in 1983 in the Michigan Rainbow Gathering, I outlined a part of my personal journey that had to do with personal identity and, or even more to the point, spiritual identity, because I was this character in things that were going on and things were happening to me and through me, which were, they were extraordinary. They were not normal. And it led me down various different paths of trying to understand what it meant for me personally. Why me? Why am I the one having these experiences and no one else seems to be having them? And then, people looked at me weird because I try to tell them my experience and they think I'm either crazy or I'm trying to be something I'm not. That's not a COVID cough, by the way. Okay. To continue on. But there were experiences that happened. So I have to say that as I said in the last episode, I was in the spiritual identity crisis. I was wondering who I was in this movie and why these extraordinary things were happening to me and not to other people. And I went through various head trips with it. I went through some ego trips. I went through some fear trips. I went through all kinds of stuff about that. It's like, to jump ahead in another part of the story, which is not part of this story chronologically. It all led me eventually to, some people trying to make me think I was Jesus, and then myself wondering whether or not I was Lucifer, because obviously it wasn't Jesus. So if I wasn't Jesus, maybe I was Lucifer. I mean, maybe you get the gist of that kind of a mind trip that I know I'm not the only one that's gone through that, but it was a mind trip and a head trip, and I went through it. And I'm proud to tell you that I'm neither Jesus nor Satan. I'm me. I'm Terry. What you see is what you get. Okay. And then that's another story, which I probably won't even tell in this thread because it's not that important. It's a personal thing. But the story I'm going to tell you is about us. It's about all of us. It's only about me because I was in it, because I was in the vision, because I got taken on this journey. So it starts off 1985, after spending a winter at a place in Arizona along the near Tucson. We'll just call it near Tucson, called the Walking Karma Ranch, which is quite a name to start with. And there was things that happened there, which are other stories that I don't need to tell here. But we spent the winter there, and up in the springtime, we packed up and we headed on to Missouri for the 1985 Missouri Rainbow Gathering. Now, for me, starting off with this whole thing about personal identity crisis, going to the Missouri Gathering was significant to me in a lot of different ways. First of all, it's the state that I was born in, so I'm going back to my birth ground, so to speak. And also it was in the heart of the theoretical New Jerusalem, which was referred to in the Keys of Enoch as the Dove, which is North America. So the heart of that dove is actually Independence, Missouri, which ironically and notably enough is also the place where the Mormons are building or have built, I'm not even sure, but they were building it back then, so they probably got it built by now. They were building a temple, a major Mormon temple there in Independence, Missouri, in the heart of the dove, the very center of this spiritual continent, also called the turtle. And so there was that. And then I was going into my 33rd year, which is the year that Yeshua supposedly finished his mission and was crucified and resurrected, depending on what you believe. So it was my spiritual coming of age year, 33. Shortly after an event which a lot of people, astrologists, refer to as their Saturn's return, which I'm not going to get into all that great. But anyway, it was a momentous time in my life. I was going there I actually had these expectations that something really big was going to happen. I didn't really know what. So as I'm walking into the gathering, I noticed there's these pamphlets hanging from the trees. So of course, they're hanging from the trees, obviously, so somebody will go look at them. So I got one of these pamphlets that were hanging in the trees. And the wording that was in these pamphlets could have been taken right out of the Keys of Enoch. And if any of you have read the book, then you'll get the reference to what I'm talking about, the wording, because it was written in a certain way. A kind of scripturally oriented, definitely Judeo-Christian oriented. But the Keys of Enoch is, I recommend reading for anybody who wants to expand their mind and consciousness and learn other perspectives, not as a truth, not as a gospel. Maybe not even as a scripture. That's up to you, I guess. But I found it quite mind expanding. I used to call it slow acid because it was like you would read something in this book and then you would have incredible dreams and solve, major equations and probably change the whole matrix reality while you're asleep. Who knows? But it felt like that sometimes. So it's a book I recommend called The Keys of Enoch by J.J. Hurtak. And I'm not recommending J.J. Hurtak because him and his organization just seems just like another cult to me. But that doesn't change the value of the words. What was challenged, just like John Lennon was an asshole, but his music is wonderful. That kind of thing. All right. So getting back to the story, these pamphlets were hanging in the trees. And they look like something right out of the Keys of Enoch. So it was like they were talking about that, that there was going to be the second coming of Yeshua at this gathering, that Yeshua was coming to the Missouri Rainbow Gathering, and it was going to be this wonderful thing. And, it's like, of course, nobody just flat out just believed it right off the bat. Said, Jesus is coming, Yeshua is coming. Nobody did any of that. But we talked about it. We talked about it a lot. So that was going on. So a lot of things happened at the Missouri Rainbow Gathering. One of the things that happened was something that we called the Medicine Show, which is another story. It's a very magical story. And I've told some of it in other videos on other platforms. But I'm not going to tell it in this story because it would detract from the main theme of this story, which is I started off by saying I call it the Great Vision because, I've had visionary experiences, but this was like the Great Vision to end all great visions for me personally. It was just incredibly powerful. So as we were going through the gathering, and we had the medicine show and stuff, I started seeing things. I was seeing things. It was like first thing I started seeing was, I called it the countenance of evil, or an evil face. It's like I couldn't state it anywhere, but it was like, so I started seeing it on my friends, people I didn't know, and it was very weird, very strange. It didn't feel good at all, and I was seeing it all kinds. And when I was seeing it on my friends, it was like throwing me for a loop. What is this? Why am I seeing this on my friends? And so, I'll say countenance of evil face. And it was the same face that ended up in different other people's faces. It was like an expression that was identifiable. Like, you recognize the expression of anger pretty much on anyone's face. Well, it was like that. This was like maniacal glee. That was the face. And it was like very Luciferian, this face. And I was seeing it on all these different people, and I had no ideas why. And, fortunately, I wasn't really seeing it in any of the couple times that I did medicine. I was seeing it, perfectly, straight walking down the road and seeing it on people. So I didn't know what I was seeing. And it was just kind of freaking me out a little bit. And then there was this other thing, which was I started seeing these crystals that were sort of like part of everyone's aura. And they were aligned with the chakras, but there was 12 of them and not 8. There was the 8 going up and down all the way from the first to the 8th chakra, which is the crown chakra. And then there was 4, which made it 12, which were like at the shoulders and down the sides of the abdomen. And I was seeing these crystals in various different people, and I could sort of sense that it was relative to the aura because I've seen auras off and on in my life. So I thought that that was somehow relative to that, but I still wasn't sure what that was either. But I had to tell you those two things because they're important to the story. The face, the countenance of evil, and the crystals. So we did the medicine show, like I said. And after the medicine show, I and my friends who had put together the medicine show, which is a very magical event, and we all did a great job. And we were basically going to have a communion amongst ourselves to celebrate the fact that we'd had done such a great job with this. And it turned out really, really high and magical and really good. And so we were going to have a communion. We went to town, got a bottle of wine, a loaf of bread, and set it up in my big MASH Army tent that I had set up at Bus Village at the Missouri Rainbow Gathering in 1985. And decided to do this communion there. So I had it assembled, had the bread and the wine, and we were all ready to go. But right before we were getting ready to do that, a friend of ours walked in, and I won't tell you his name because he may still be around and he might still get in trouble for this. But there was a member that we all knew was a friend of ours, and he was the family chemist at the Rainbow. I'm giving away state secrets here. And he would often take LSD that was in the tar ergot tar stage and bring it to the gathering and grow the crystals right there at the gathering. So it was like ultra fresh. So he came into our tent and he asked us if we wanted to do a test on his latest batch. For those of you who are younger, that was that literal acid test. Okay, we were testing the acid to see how good it was, and we knew this guy, and we knew he was good, and we knew that his medicine was usually clean. So we said, yeah, sure, we'll do a test. So he gave us a few drops of this fresh batch that he explained to us that there were some magical things about it that he wasn't sure what it meant, but he wanted to tell us about it. So he told us. Now, anybody who knows anything about the creation of LSD knows that it's done several different stages. Starts with the ergot on rye. After that, they extract a tar, and from the tar, they grow a crystal. Now, there's other things involved there that I don't know about because I'm not a chemist, so I'm just giving the layman's description of how it was done. They grew these crystals on the tar, and then they used a device, which now they probably use lasers. But in those days, they had something which was called a chromoscope, or I think it was called a chromoscope. I may be wrong about the instrument they used. But they used the instrument to shine a light through the crystals that were growing on the ergot tar. And those crystals were tetrahedrons, meaning they were four-sided pyramids. And so when they shone a light through those crystals, the light would prism out into like a rainbow, just exactly like the symbol of Pink Floyd. So if you ever wondered where they got that, that's where they got it. Okay, so the tuning of the LSD, you might have heard the story of the 60s, how we had orange sunshine and purple haze and red dragon and all these different color-associated acids. Well, there's a reason for that. Because the higher you go up the color spectrum of the rainbow, the closer you get to violet, the purer and the higher vibration the LSD is going to be. Now, see, people may argue with that if they want, but I'm sorry, that's the facts. So, of course, that's an esoteric level. So on a chemistry level, they'll probably laugh. Okay, but at any rate, that's how they determined. And that's why they said, that's why brown acid, for example, was considered to be bad. And you heard that in Woodstock, where Wavy Gravy gets up and says, everybody stay away from the brown acid, because it was bad. Okay, but the purple haze was good. Okay, so you get that. All right, so moving on. He said that he started growing these crystals, and he went away, to attend the 4th of July Circle, which anybody who's familiar with Rainbow knows what the 4th of July Circle is, where everybody gathers in silence, ideally. And at one point when everybody's there, right at noon, they all link hands and they do an Om. And they Om for a while. And then after that, they let go of their hands and they scream all the energy out that they just made in their vortex and toss it all back in the universe. Which I often thought from the first time I experienced it that it was quite a waste. Why would you gather together to create all that energy in the vortex in a circle like that and then just throw it all away? It never made sense to me. I mean, I asked people about it, and as far as I'm concerned, their explanations were lame. So this crystal that was growing on this ergot was a tetrahedron, four-sided triangle. And the person who started this process, the chemist who created the stuff that we were going to test, he left it in a state where the crystal was growing, and he went to the main circle. This particular circle, and I remember it, was a really kind of high and magical one. Most of the people, it's like we were silent all the way up till noon, and everybody joined together silently, and then right at noon we started oming, and the om grew into this majestic thing, and it was great, and everybody felt really, energized by it. And of course they all threw up their hands and threw it away. But the point of this part of the story is that while this was going on, something happened to that crystal that was growing on the ergot. And what happened was that single tetrahedron crystal morphed, or it grew 2 more tetrahedrons that grew out of it. So it basically became a tri-tetrahedron crystal shape. So it was different. So the dynamics of it were different. And that's why we were testing it, because we were experienced. So if anyone's familiar with tetrahedrons and Merkaba and other stuff, they might see the significance of that. So the LSD crystal mutated into something new. So it was a brand new strain of LSD. Don't know what number you would call it, but it was a new thing that we did. So on this night that we were given this test by this person, we were going to do this bread and communion, and we all decided to test this acid. And so probably about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes or so after we did this, everybody's kind of laying back, kicking back, letting the rushes go so we can come into it and and do what we're going to do. And about 15, 20 minutes in, I had to go outside and take a leak. So I went outside and I'm taking a leak, and I heard a wolf growl. I mean, it was like, hackles on the back of my neck rose a little bit, and it sounded really strange. Of course, the fact that I'm coming on definitely has something to do with that. Sure. So I said to myself, wow, that dog sure sounds like a wolf. And I continued to do my business. But then it growled again, and it sounded even more like a wolf. And I'm going, man, that really sounds like a wolf. I'm saying, well, can't be wolves here. This is like the Ozarks in Missouri. They used to have timber wolves here, but they haven't had them here for like 40 or 50 years. So it can't be a wolf. It has to be a wolf dog or something. So I'm thinking, okay, fine, that's it. And then it growled again. And the third time it growled, it was like, okay, all right, something is going on. I don't know what's going on. Something's going on, and it's not good. That wolf is growling about that, or that dog or whatever is growling about something that's going on, and I got to find out. So I went back into the tent, and looked at everybody, and they're all lounging around, laying around, smiles starting to form on their faces because they're starting to get to this point in their journey. So I decided to go check on my bus. My kids were in the bus, and my wife was in the bus, and so I went into the bus, and right off the bat, it's like the vibes in my bus were just really weird. They were weird. They were like, I wouldn't say they were dark, but they were weird and strange. And my kids, and at that point in time, I had I had I had 2 kids, just 2. No, I had three kids. I had 3 kids at that point, and so all three of them were asleep because this was like later on in the evening, and they had already gone to bed, and they were like moaning in their sleep. I mean, it was eerie. It was like, just really weird sounds they were making. And I'm going, what's going on here? What's happening? And I asked my wife, well, how come they're doing that? And it's like, she says, I don't know. It's like I even tried to wake them up and they wouldn't wake up. And I'm going, really? So I went over there and I'm gently trying to wake them up and they wouldn't wake up. I mean, I wasn't going to like shake them or anything because, you don't do that to people when they're asleep. It's just not a good thing. So I'm going, what is this? So I went up to the front of my bus and I sat in my chair and I started meditating and I started concentrating on making a big bubble of energy and protection around my bus to protect my family with all of the rainbow, new age, psychic stuff that I had heard about. Said all the words, whatever, to try and make this big shield to protect myself and my family from whatever was going on. And nothing was working. It was just getting worse. Their moans were getting weirder and weirder and weirder, and I was starting to feel creeped out. So I thought, well, there's nothing left to do now but pray. So I started praying to God, started praying to Yeshua. And while I was praying to Yeshua and God, asking for protection, this word came into my mind, burned across my consciousness like fire letters. And it was a name, the sacred name of God, like Yahweh kind of, but it was completely indescribable. I can tell you a little bit, but do not think that what I'm telling you is the complete absoluteness of what it was. But I had the word, I had the name. Suddenly, Yahweh, the Father, Yeshua, had given me the sacred name of God and how to call upon that. So without questioning it or arguing with it or saying, what is this? Is this real? Blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, fine, I'm going to do this because, something was going on. I had to do something and I was praying and this is what the prayer said to do. So I went outside and 3 times with my breath, I spoke the name of God. Inhaling and exhaling, I spoke 3 times. And after the 3rd time, this huge, powerful, benevolent, good feeling spirit, which I could only associate as being the Father, maybe Yeshua, but it was more like the Father, came and literally sat on me and enveloped me like an envelope. And started speaking with me. And as soon as that happened, there was a shield that went up like a bubble. And there was this energies, whatever it was, it stopped. My children started breathing normally, stopped moaning, and they went into dreaming in their sleep. And it was like back to normal. So that was accomplished. And yet there's this big, gigantic spirit like God that's like sitting on me and wrapped around me. And I felt as safe as I ever felt. Nothing is going to hurt me or harm me. I was safe. It's like being in the arms of my real dad, whom I never met. But I got to experience that night. And this spirit, this Father started speaking to me. Now here's the strange thing, which I'm going to be honest about. and psychologists and psychiatrists and all kinds of so-called professionals that think they know what they're talking about might have some sort of a return or a response to this next statement. But for me, my experience, but I'm trying to be honest with you exactly the way I experienced it, so that it's like I've been very careful not to leave out steps, which I often do in the process of this. But this spirit notably sounded like me, felt like me, and if I could look at it, I had this feeling that it would look like me too. But yet at the same time, it was like the Spirit of God. Okay, you could try and figure that out if you want to. I've come to levels of acceptance of things that I don't understand, but they're still real. But I just told you that to give you some context to what was going on, because little old me, Terry, who at the time was called Vision, right? In the rainbow, my rainbow name was Vision. At the time, which was part of my identity crisis I mentioned earlier. But it was just little me, the human being, and this huge, gigantic, powerful spirit that was wrapped around me and protecting me and my family and speaking to me in my voice, telling me what was going on. Now, it's like the first thing that was told to me was what was going on. Well, it said, you may think that this is spirit talking to me. You may think that the Rainbow Gathering is some magical event that is for the promotion of spirit and consciousness and everything else. But the fact is that the Rainbow Gathering, like every other organization that's ever made, has been infiltrated and controlled by adversarial spirit. It is nothing more than a trap to try and trap those who are actually seeking the truth, who are or getting ready to seek the truth. It is intended as a distraction and a trap for the elite followers of God. That is what the Rainbow Gathering is. And that's what the Spirit told me at that point. And then what I was experiencing was an effort on certain groups that in that organization, which were trying to basically get control or interfere with my family, separate me from my wife, separate me from my children, get a hold of my genetic DNA. Okay, now that may sound weird to some people, but that's what the Spirit was telling me. And there's reasons for it. And now that my youngest son is gone, Adam Jeshuel Hubbard is no longer here, and the rest of my children are of age, they're all adults. It's like I could no longer protect them even if I wanted to. They're all aware of this, and after they see this, they may become more aware of it. And that would be great. That'd be great. I'd appreciate that. That'd be great. But I'm no longer worried about protecting my family. They're all warriors. They can all protect themselves. So the adversary might, think about it, but it'll avail them nothing because they've done the worst they could do, and we're still here. You took Jess from us. And, that's sort of like declaring war, but our war is different than yours. Our war is about truth. Our war is about love. Our war is about the greatness of the Spirit, not the minusculeness of mind and science and math and finite so-called reality. Because reality is much bigger than anyone who thinks they know what it is. Well, I digress. So I can see that I've reached 30 minutes here. So I'm going to stop this part and resume. Okay, so continuing where I left off. The Spirit is explaining to me what's going on. The next thing the Spirit showed me was that there was a group of people that were down in the main meadow gathered around a fire, and they were simply put witches. All right, they were part of a coven. And they had interest in me, according to the terms I expressed right at the end of the last little clip there. They had interest in me and my family. In fact, there had been somebody spying on the whole thing you were doing during the whole time, which comes into the story as we go. Her name was Helen. You'll recognize it when I get to it later on. So the Spirit is telling me that these people are having this circle, and it even showed me the circle, and I could see them gathered around the fire, and they're like, doing, I call it mumbo jumbo, because that's what it was. Gobbledygook words and spells and stuff, which, they probably even know what the hell they were saying any more than anybody else. But they had an intention behind it. And that intention had manifested in them projecting their negative spirit up here against my family, and that was invading the dreams of my kids. And when the Spirit threw up that big dome of protection, they were like forced outside of it. And the Spirit showed me they were still trying to do it from where they're at, but they couldn't get in, so we were safe. So the Spirit showed me that and said, now the story really begins. The Spirit says to me, Now, I have to show you something that you are not ready to see. You're not ready to receive this information. But because of the circumstances have been accelerated, and because of this direct threat against you and your family, it's time to do it anyway. So you're going to get this information whether you're ready for it or not. And I'm going like, okay. Now remember, I'm kind of like sitting in the back seat of this experience. I'm not taking control of. I mean, I can move, I can scratch my nose and think my own thoughts, but there's this big, huge being that's wrapped around me. And this being just told me that there was something that I was about ready to receive that I wasn't ready for. But then the Spirit took me. I often remember the story of the Christmas Carol by gosh, I can't think the author's name. But I'm talking about. The Christmas Carol was like written in the 1800s. And the story is about Ebenezer Scrooge and the spirit of Christmas past, present, and future come and take him on all these journeys, right? Well, it was so much like that in so many ways. Only it was just one spirit. And it was the sacred, mighty, Holy Spirit. Even though it looked and sounded like me, it wasn't me. And the Spirit took me on a journey. Took me all the way back to the very beginning, literally, of time, which I've come to understand in later years the significance of that phrase, the beginning of time. But I'm going to tell the stories I experienced it. I'm not going to give you any conclusions until afterwards. So I got taken all the way back to the beginning of time, to the moment where, biblically speaking, Adam and Eve appear on the earth. All right. Only it wasn't represented that way to me. I mean, there were similarities there, which you'll see as I tell the story. So I go back to this past, and there's a circle. There's a circle of 21 angels. Angels is the word I'll use. They have other names that they developed, but they were, you could call them, intergalactic, interstellar beings. I don't care what you call them. To me, they were like the angels. Okay, and they were all in a circle. And here, they all had these crystals that I was telling you about earlier. They all had these crystals, and they were like just blazing. These crystals were just blazing. It's kind of like this group of beings beamed, like Star Trek, into the center of this circle of these 12 angels. And while they were beaming in, it's like these, there was light everywhere. It's so bright you could hardly look at it. And I'm kind of like in the story of Charles Dickens, that's right. I'm kind of like sitting in the back watching this thing as an observer. I'm not really, part of it or anything. I'm just watching it. And these two 12-foot tall, I have to call them angels, and they were 12 foot tall. They had wings, physical wings, like the angels that we think about. And they had long robes. So in a lot of ways, they looked a lot like what we call traditional angels, except they were 12 foot tall. And they weren't like, muscular. They were tall, like stretched out tall. And they seemed to have almost like a Vulcan kind of attitude. Like they looked around and they saw their business was done and they beamed out just like that and left this little group of human beings standing there, whom was inferred without actually identified as Adam and Eve and their friends. Okay, well, this is already different than Genesis. It's already different than the Gnostic version of Sophia. It's different, and yet it's the same story. Because there's Adam, there's Eve. So as soon as the 12-foot tall angels that like escorted them, beamed them down to be received by these other 12, all of the light went out and all the crystals and all those 12 that were standing around the circle and they went dark. Those crystals, their auras went dark. There was no light there. They had been reflecting the light and they themselves had none. And as soon as the light went away, this countenance of evil, the face that I described earlier, was on all of their faces. So there was 12 of these dark angels standing there. And at that moment, and just for that one brief moment through this entire journey, the Spirit put me into the being who was Adam. And for one brief moment, I was Adam. Right at the moment that Adam realized that he just stepped in a trap. And or it would have been my reaction if it was me. I was, oh shit. And then him and all of his friends, including Eve, they were all like put into a sleep. Okay. Does that sound familiar? Okay. So they got put to sleep, and at some point while they were sleeping, Adam, and I'm going to call him Adam from now on, just to keep it simple. I've also called him First Man. But Adam at this point woke up. Well, everybody else is asleep, and Adam woke up, and he saw that they were in this, like a cavern. It was like a cavern, but it was also a laboratory. There was like these, gurneys and tubes and, all kinds of stuff that you would associate with the laboratory or a medical lab, right? Something very similar to that. And he saw that these fallen and some of their, whoever there was working for him, were extracting genetic material from Eve, from him and all of his friends, and obviously they had taken some from him as well. And he recognized what was going on because they were all well educated. They weren't like children. They were like fully grown human beings in this story that I'm witnessing. And so Adam knew what he was seeing. He knew that he was seeing this extraction of genetic material going on. And then they noticed that the fallen, what I'm going to call the fallen, because I'm going to get to that sooner or later, they recognized that he was awake, and they immediately came and put him back to sleep. Okay, so when they finally woke up, sometime later, they were in their camp. And their camp was like set up, and for some reason, they couldn't remember how their camp got set up, but they also didn't remember being in the laboratory. However, Adam did. He remembered it. And he tried, he talked to other people. Did you guys see that? Did you wake up and see what I saw? And none of them did. They all laughed at him and said, well, that's a crazy dream, man. That's really a crazy dream. So he didn't talk about it. He didn't talk about it. In fact, he never talked about it with any living soul until his deathbed. When he died, he told his sons. But getting back to the moment of the journey, he communed with the Father. Or if you want to look at it from a sci-fi perspective, he talked to galactic headquarters. Say, what do I do, man? It's like, the mission just got hijacked. There's like these fallen, because there was this rebellion that was going on, and these guys are part of the rebellion, and we just stepped in their trap. And the answer back from the Father to Adam was, well, it's your choice. If you think that you can still pull off the mission, then you can go ahead and try. Or we can, but I think we should, but that, basically the message was they should abort, that they should abort the mission and basically sacrifice the earth as a casualty. And rescue, Adam and his friends, but sacrifice the earth and give it over to the fallen rebellion. And Adam thought about it. I don't know how long he thought about it, but he thought about it probably some days. And then he got back to the Father and he said, I've decided that we're going to stay. That we're going to stay, and because I believe that your seed, your plan, your genetic plan that created us is superior to anything they can come up with, and that eventually my seed, which is your seed, will overcome the seed of the adversary, and that the seed of Adam and Eve, or mankind, will prevail in the end, and therefore we will stay. So they agreed, okay, well, you can stay, but you got to know that if you do, you're all going to get cut off from the tree of life, which was, something that I don't understand, but it had something to do with sustaining them. And once they were cut off from the tree of life, they would no longer be sustained by it. So therefore, they would have to suffer physical death. So Adam decided that it was worth it. That was worth it to suffer physical death, to salvage everything that he could salvage. Because the Father is not wanting to lose one part, not one hair, not one molecule, not one atom of all the things that he's created. So for him to sacrifice the whole planet just to save Adam and Eve and his friends, you get the idea, okay? But Adam knew that was not the way things should be done. So he believed that they could do it, that they could pull it off, that they could, through his progeny and his seed, they would manage to reestablish the throne of God on this corrupted, fallen planet. And so he was given the go-ahead, but also knew he was going to die. Now, of course, like I said, he told none of this to anybody else because they wouldn't understand, and they wouldn't believe him because, they didn't experience it that way. So, like I said, he told no one until on the day he died in his deathbed. He told his sons, and part of what he told his sons is actually recorded in a Gnostic text in the library of Nakamati called the Apocrypha of Adam, in case anybody wants to check it out. So, that happened. So the next thing that happened is this, I go through this step-by-step fast forward through history, right? And watching how these fallen, which we could also call the Nephilim, took the genetic material of the first human beings and manipulated them into subhuman species that they could use as servants to do such things like mine gold, like they did in Africa. And there's stories about that. So they were using the genetic material of Adam and Eve, of humanity, to create a subspecies, basically as slaves and servants who had use of these because they were capable of manipulating matter quite well with these things right here, but not much of this. So they genetically created a subspecies of human beings which was stupid and dexterous, right? So they would be good, willing slaves. In the process, they also altered the DNA in various different ways, one of which was to create a planned obsolescence so that we only live so long and then we die. Because, the fact is that if you're young, you're easily swayed. And it's the wise men, the old men that actually live to be older than me or as old as me or older, who actually start getting the real thing known as wisdom. Up to that point, you're so overwhelmed by the things of the world, you don't know what the fuck is real. Take my word for it. Anyway, getting back to the story. So they created these subspecies. And meanwhile, Adam and even their friends, they created a whole civilization. They created a civilization, and a thriving civilization for probably thousands of years. Meanwhile, this other race of subhumans, which, by the way, associates with the so-called land of Nod, or the people that Cain married into, and Nimrod and all this other stuff. But they created this other race, subspecies race, and here's what happened. So the Nephilim found themselves seriously sexually attracted to the females that they were creating. So they started having intercourse. It was a matter of time before, they had offspring. Those offspring are referred to as the Nephilim, the men of renown, giants, all kinds of different descriptions. But from those offspring, which is really not very clear in a lot of people's minds, but they're also the Nephilim, is the hybrids between those and human beings again. They created the first bloodlines and dynasties of all the families, the 12 families, one for each one of those angels, that have been ruling the world for tens of thousands of years. We know the names of some of them, and we know the names of their organizations. They've been at it for tens of thousands of years. And at the head of each one of those families is a fallen angel. Now, at some point, they got kicked out of heaven and they got kicked down to the earth. And when they did that, they lost a lot of their powers. They got cut off from the tree of life too. So they were physical beings that were going to die. So they started doing this thing where after they started these dynasties, these families, these royal bloodlines, they started taking generations and they would train like 2 or 3 of the children to be willing to give up their spirit and their ghosts and give up their bodies to their grandparents, the head of these families, these fallen angels. At a certain point in their life, like around the age of 14, there was a rite which they would actually go in and they would get kicked out of their bodies, and their grandparent, whomever it was, the fallen one that was the head of whichever family it was, would come in and take, and that's how those Nephilim have been reborn generation after generation after generation, as they've been possessing their own grandchildren, kicking them out. So, as they established these dynasties, they also established other things. They established the very things that we call civilization, because the original civilization of Adam and Eve was much different than the civilization that we have. Civilization that we have is the civilization of Cain and the Nephilim and those 12 families who were set up like the Lord of the Rings to rule us all, to rule over us all. And those dynasties were, they still exist. They're still ruling us through economics, through false law, through false religion, through now the internet's making a heyday of it. Right? So they're still ruling us. It's still there. And this has been going on. They're responsible for all the wars. They're responsible for perpetuating ignorance. They're responsible for maintaining in every generation the incapacity of those who would rise above to do so. The only ones who are empowered in this world are the ones who play their game of economics, power, politics, and religion. If you do not play their games, you will not be empowered in this world. And you will have to, gain your connections in the ways that you can. Okay, well, it might seem like the story is over, but it's not. Because as I made my way back from the past through all this seeing of history, and I saw a lot, which we can talk about if you want, because it's all there. Everything I saw was but it was all seeing it from the context of how these things were created and the purpose they were created for, why we live our lives and we go, what the fuck? Is this what life is? Being, going working for some master almost all of the times of our life and, getting this raw basic pleasure out of fucking people and having kids. And I'm sorry, but I always thought from a child onward that there just had to be more to life than all this. And it's true, because this life has been hijacked. Our entire reality has been hijacked. They built a fake reality on top of the real one, and everybody's living in the fake one. And you should be able to see that. We've had lots of evidence. There's been movies come forth, books come forth. Other people have come forth with this understanding. Well, don't just treat it as some sort of fantastic sci-fi idea, because there's reality there. There is reality in that concept, because it was created by a fallen archetype with malignant mind, with no fucking heart. All right? If there was heart, it was gone a long, long time ago. We're dealing with hollow shells which travel, and the only ones who actually have any kind of living capacity are the 12 who've been repossessing, physical bodies. And, there are things in history that happened that kept knocking them down. Like the flood was a big one. Read the Epistle of St. Jude. Because when the flood happened, their power was broken in some major ways. It's like, the story of Noah and the things that came before that they're part of what was going on, even though people don't understand a lot of the nuances about the fallen, the Nephilim, the Watchers. And it's important to know at this point in time. So the story continues. All this stuff has been shown to me about the history of civilization in the world, religions, economics, everything else, where it really fucking comes from, who we really are and who we really aren't. And I'm sitting back in my bus going, wow, all this stuff just happened to me. And I had, really a lot of it I hadn't even fantasized about, some of it. I was an avid sci-fi reader, of course, but I hadn't really seen some of that in that way. Now, you guys have all heard this story in various different respects in the past 20 years since the internet. So it may not sound like new to you, but in 1985, it was a veritable revelation for me and for those I was able to communicate it to. So the story continues. So I'm sitting here in my bus, and I'm no longer kind of wrapped in this spirit. It's almost like the spirit's kind of sitting next to me now, right? And I'm having this conversation, and I'm noticing that the shield is still up, right? Shield is still up. My kids are still sleeping peacefully. But there's like these energies, like these spirits that were attacking us. They're still like outside that dome trying to get in like insects. They're like popping up against the dome like, insects against the electric, what I'm talking about. So they're like, and I say to the spirit, I say, how come they're still there? Well, after all this, and there's a shield there, and they're defeated, why are they still there? And so I get this immediate answer. It was a question. It was put back to me. The question put back to me was, what is it that binds you to them? Okay, now you've been following all the nuances that I've been carefully trying to include in this story. You might understand the fact of that question, how that question pertains. All right. And if I'm not going to reiterate, if you guys want to talk to me about it later, I'll be glad to explain it deeper. But the Spirit says to me, what is it that binds you to them? And I immediately knew what the answer was. I knew. So Vision grabbed his guitar and walked out of the bus, walked into the tent where everybody was sitting there with a shit-eating grin on their faces because they weren't having the same trip I was having. And I walked in with my guitar, And I raised it above my head and I said, "This is my statement and testimony to the universe." Now, I had to elaborate on what that meant later because of what I did. Whereupon, as soon as I said that to everybody, I had everybody's attention, the entire universe's attention, I smashed my guitar into many pieces, right? Oh my God, what a shock. Everybody was like shocked. I mean, Vision, the magical guitar player who was, there was no one like me. There was no one like Vision. So, Vision smashed his guitar and became Terry. Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. And I didn't know at the time that what happened when I smashed my guitar in some places. I got told about it later on, and I'll get back to that when I get to that point. So, no, I have to tell it now, because what happens when I smashed my guitar, all these people that were gathered around in that circle, that were the witches, the coven, whatever, they had some sort of strange designs on me and my family. When I smashed my guitar, their fire exploded in their face. I mean, they didn't get burned, that kind of exploded, but it went, right? And they all fell back and their circle was broken, and that was it. They were gone, all right? So I didn't need the shield of protection anymore. And it was me, Terry. And so, but I didn't know that at the time. And I'll tell you how I find out later as I continue the story, because the story's not over. Okay. So that was done. I defeated that, that adversary. I had this incredible revelation that was just running around my head like you could not believe. I smashed my guitar and I'm absolutely elated. I'm elated, not because I smashed my guitar. I did have regrets. It was a good guitar. It was my guitar. Everybody knew it was attached to me. They recognized it. But that was Vision's guitar, So I had to destroy Vision, because Vision was this persona in the rainbow, which was false. It was pretentious. I mean, a lot of people in the rainbow took on rainbow names, and, based on various different things. I mean, they took on names of animals, they took on names of things, whatever. There wasn't any kind of, basic, this is what a rainbow name is kind of thing. So, people were named all kinds of different things. I was named Vision, right? Based on another story that, was it's personal history, but not having to do with this. So, but it has the fact that I destroyed Vision and became Terry is very important, because that's how I reconciled the pretentiousness of that avatar of Vision, right? Because Vision got to do things Terry didn't get to do, right? Believe me, Vision was a minor celebrity, so I got, as Vision, a little bit of a dose of that. So I was feeling quite relieved and really, 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 really high and vibrating at a really high frequency. And I went around and I started things by waving my arms around. It's like, it seemed like I was creating wind. People were telling me to stop. And I wasn't thinking I was creating wind. I was just just felt like doing it, But people thought, they interpreted it because everything else that was going on. Because, I smashed my guitar. I broke a major thing in the magic department there. And it was supposed to be broke. Or it was. Those guys are not supposed to do that shit. You do not invade somebody's psyche with your fucking head, okay? Especially with a group of people. Group of people do not get together and do sorcerous spells to try and mess with your mind, all right? Whether you're on psychedelics or not. That, my friends, is not only bad form, it's evil, okay? It's malignant and it's adversarial. No friend of the devil is a friend of mine. I'm sorry, that's a fact. So, that pretty much, wrapped up that night, I guess. Everybody slept. Well, actually, I didn't sleep because I sang. That's the end. This is sort of the end of this particular part of the story. As dawn was coming up, As dawn was coming up, one of my friends who had been there, and she was still in a state of shock, because of some of my younger friends, they looked up to me quite a bit as a musician. Some of them, those people I actually, taught to play to some degree. She was one of those. I actually gave her guitar lessons at one point. So to see me smash my guitar, she didn't understand why I did it. So for her, it was a shocking experience. And I got to explain it to her later. But at the moment, the dawn was coming up and I had to sing in the dawn. I just had to do it. So I asked her to join me in singing Hallelujah to the Dawn. So we sang Hallelujah to the Dawn, which is sung to the tune of the Canon in D by Pachelbel. And so we sung the dawn in, and as we were singing, I had this just clear and absolute feeling like I was sitting in my father's lap, like a child, in my father's lap, or even like a lamb, like a little lamb sitting in my father's lap. And it was an incredible experience, considering everything and what it looked like to everybody else was going on with me. Everybody thought I was having a bad trip, because I smashed my guitar and for me though, I had such a revelation and understanding, and things were opened up so much and I was relieved of this burden of being this fake persona of vision. I was relieved. I relieved myself of that and saved my family, protected my family. So I was feeling pretty good, pretty full of the Spirit, pretty high, and I was singing Hallelujah to the Dawn. And I felt just like, for the first time in my life, what it felt like to sit in my father's lap. Because I never met my father in life, so I never really got the memory of sitting in his lap. And as a father, my sons and my daughters sitting in my lap are treasure memories. So I know they're treasure memories for them. So the only one I have is this one. So that's the end of that part of the story, but it's still not the end of the tale. So I didn't go to sleep. So the next thing I have to do is I have to get ready to leave because it's done. I'm done. It's like that was it. It's like I was, after almost 10 years of following the Rainbow Trail, it's like I reached the end and that was it. Well, it's time to go. Time to take a different course in destiny. Because Terry had just arrived after being gone for 10 years because this guy named Vision took his place. Which was me, but you sort of had to be there, I guess. I hope you understand it a little bit. So the other parts of this story is that I had to go down and collect my tent, which was down into the gathering, because we were up in Bus Village and the gathering was down in a meadow, and I had a tent down there, which I actually never stayed in. It's just like this empty tent that was there the whole time. But I went to get my tent, and on the way down, there was, and I'll mention his name because he's because I don't think he'd get any trouble for him mentioning his name, because it didn't have to do with some of these other parts. But he was a major player in the Rainbow, and still is, I think. But his name was Badger, one of those names. And as I was walking down the hill, he fell in step with me, and because I suppose he probably heard about me smashing my guitar. So he was wanting to check out, see if everything was okay, and whereupon I told him the whole story that I just told you, walking down the hill, telling this whole story. And to credit and my surprise, he actually, said that he often wondered about some of those things himself, and that it wasn't, he actually believed me. He thought it was a valid experience. He thanked me for sharing it with him. And then we got to where we decided we're going to get some water. We're going to go get a drink of water from the fresh spring that was flowing down the mountain. And we're walking towards the water, and this woman comes walking towards us, who I briefly introduced before in the story as Helen, right? And she saw me, and she dropped the water that she was literally dropped. It fell out of her hands, and her face went slack and turned white as a sheet, and it looked like she might faint. And then, without anybody saying anything, she just starts babbling to me incoherently, telling this whole story again. She's telling the story from her perspective, right? Only it's all babble and it's incoherent. But because I just told Badger, we both understood what she was talking about. And even though we knew she was incoherent, but we could hear what she was saying. And she talked about her experience, about how they had all gathered in that circle around the fire, and they were doing their magic and sorcery and, invading our space, whatever they were trying to do. Had something to do with trying to get me to join their coven. That's really what it seemed that it was about. That's what they were trying to do. And I don't know why they thought I would, but that's what they had, this idea. And the way they were going to do that was to separate me from my family. That was one of their plans. So at any rate, she's telling this whole story, and Badger's sitting there looking at me like, oh my fucking God, that's like collaboration right there. It's like, you're getting collaboration, Vision. And he wasn't calling me Terry yet. And I'm going, yeah. So it got verified by this. And she also, that's when we found out about the fire exploding and everybody falling back in the circle, getting broken. And so that was like an unexpected validation the Spirit gave us, which, has me fall back on something that I've spoken before in a couple of my other episodes, which is about having witnesses. Witnesses are real important. They're important for you, and they're important for those around you. Because if you have witnesses, then you know that if your witnesses see, hear, and experience what you see, hear, and experience, even if it seems like it's happening to you, and you're the center of it or whatever, if they see it and they witness it, then you know you're not fucking nuts. You know that it really happened. So I know everything I told you was real, right? Everything I told you was real. It really happened, just in the way I said it. And I don't believe that I'm the only person in history to ever have an experience like that. Though because of the nature of the world, which is controlled by the fallen archetypes of creation, the fallen angels, the Nephilim, the Titans, the 12 families, the bloodlines of dynasties going all the way back to those 12 angels, and still here, still ruling. Although, of course, they started moving into economics quite some time ago. So the kings and the pharaohs and which were the gods. I mean, they were the gods once before they were the kings and the pharaohs. But after the flood, they couldn't be the gods anymore. They were the gods all the way up to the flood, but that power got destroyed by the flood, and they had to start repossessing bodies in order to stay here, and they've done it. The good news is that the only hold and power that they have over us is the fact that we believe in these systems that they built. We believe in their systems of economics. We believe in the values that they've placed on inanimate, non-living things. In fact, we believe in those inanimate things much more than we believe in the organic living entities, ourselves, our friends, our family, the people around us. And human beings are the worst. We are the most corrupted creatures on this planet. The animals are completely innocent, and we eat them. That speaks a lot. Now, I like beef too, and I like buffalo as far as eating is concerned. But I'm in the flesh. I'm going to get eaten. They're going to eat me, or it's going to be burned. I'd rather it got ate, but the way the system is, I might not even have that freedom. So the reason why they have this power, people, is because we give it to them. It's as simple as that. It's very complicated and well woven into this tapestry of bullshit and lies. But it's still simple. We give them this power over us. So it's only logical that if we can find ways to stop giving them power, they're going to lose that power. So think about that. They exist. They are real. They have power over us. They have infiltrated our planet. They've been controlling and ruling us for tens of thousands of years. Some, like David Icke, he calls them the reptilians. And I'm not going to argue with his perspective on that, because we're seeing the same thing, essentially. All right. And there are many others that I can't think of right off the top of my head that are aware of these things. All right. And by us, even though there's going to be a whole 5 or 6 of you who see this, compared to David Icke's several hundred thousands and Russell Brand 4 million, whatever. So, it's like, and I don't care. I'm only doing this because I feel obligated to do it. I'm doing it for Jesh. Because, it's like Jeshua had an understanding. Everything I told you, Jesh, I also told Jesh and the rest of my children and my family, and they're all aware of it. And it's been very difficult because, it's never been about me. It's not about me. It's like why I smashed my guitar as Vision, because I didn't want it to be about me. I didn't write my songs to be about me. No, sure, yeah, there was a time when I was young and full of hormones where I loved using my guitar to seduce young, beautiful women. I admit it. Yeah, that's true. But that was a phase of my life, and I passed through it. And at some point, the muse itself, the beauty of the music and the ability of the power to deliver truth through music. That's what motivated me and still does. And Jesh understood that. Jeshwell, my youngest son who has left us, he understood that. And I'm not saying and the rest of my children don't. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm speaking for Jesh because he's not here and he can't speak for himself anymore. So I get to do that. I'm his dad. Right. So the story is pretty much over. You probably might want to go back and play back so you can get some of the dynamics of it. I know I will, to make sure I didn't miss anything, because I want to make sure the story gets told in all the important parts, because I don't want to tell it again. Right? I've told it. All I need to say at this point, it's like with what we have with these tools and technologies, even if they are in adversarial roots, this is like swords into plowshares. We take the evil intentions that are involved in this technology and turn it around. So, as I come to the end of this particular episode, which is the longest one of all the ones I've done so far, what my original intention was to open up these topics for conversation, because the whole thing about anecdotal evidence is that it's about experience that people have, which are, in this instance, extraordinary or out of the ordinary, that normally are treated as being, well, this guy's a little off his nuts, or it's a conspiracy theory, or something that discredits it and makes it so that people don't get the benefit of the experience. Of people trying to share this experience, they don't get the benefit of it, right? Because of all these things which are programmed into the society and the civilization, the value system, the economic system, the political system, the religious systems, the social systems, the media, and everything, right? It's totally in there. It's woven in there, so you can't get away from it. Nobody can, even those of us who are figuring it out. In fact, it makes it worse, because you're a slave and that your time is being co-opted, and you still have to go through all these motions, still have to do these things, because if you don't, you'll starve or die. I mean, it's quite a setup. But the reason is because we continue to give these systems power. Yeshua showed us the miraculous. In every miracle that he performed, he allowed everyone to know that it happened because of the faith and the belief of the one who was being affected or healed or whatever you want to call it. All right. And it's like Yeshua said when speaking of the last days and the end times. And these are definitely starting to look a lot like that's what we got here. The end times, okay? It's starting to look a lot like that. And if you look at some of my other visionary experiences, you could see where I might come to that conclusion myself, right? But it's all about giving that power to the right source, to the right spirit, to the right consciousness, to the right heart, the right mind. And we've all been tricked and cajoled and programmed and pressured and oppressed and repressed and depressed and compressed into fucking complying with all these false systems forever, since time began. Ah, there it is. See, when time began. At the very beginning, we've been pushed into this compromise with the actual reality. And it's illustrated by the way we live. I mean, here I am. I'm telling you this and using my camera, my video, my phone as a camera inside a bus, which is sitting on this beautiful piece of property. And a reason why I'm not outside is because you wouldn't be able to get good audio recording, so I did it inside. But outside is this beautiful world, and we spend so much of our time with walls between us and it, with this kind of a subconscious, mysterious yearning to be part of it, and yet we aren't. That's an example of where we are. Our entire world is false. It's a matrix, an illusion, created by fallen archetypical beings whose only interest is maintaining their existence by, like, vampires and succubus, living off of our life force and our time and our energy, and giving the favored slave status on the top of the pyramid to those who physically rule over us, the politicians, the CEOs, the people with lots and lots of money who get to make things happen because they're the ones who actually make the laws, not us, regardless of what it says in the Constitution. Because if you can't buy a lawyer, the Constitution is meaningless. There's a lot of people figured that out. So you give your power to God, to the power of the miraculous, and have faith in the power of God and the miraculous. And it's not up to me to tell you how to do that. Everyone has to find their own way. I mean, there's clues there. I'll give you the big clue. Yeshua is his name. But what you do with that is all up to you. And it's not up to you or me to dictate to anyone else how it is they do that. And that's important too. But we have to learn how to give our power and our belief and our faith to the right consciousness, to the right heart, to the right spirit, to the right mind. And this world is none of those things. Money, values, the values of this world is not of those things. Now, we have some of those values as human beings. We value the time we spend with the people we love, our friends we have good times with, share laughs, all those things. Those are the valuable things. Those are the things in life that have value. Everything else is just stuff. It's just stuff. I mean, I can't get any better than that. So, it's like I got lots of stuff to talk about. I'll talk, I'm done with my stories though. Unless I can find one that I think may be pertinent. And I haven't told them all. But I'm done with the stories. Except for one little part. After I came back to Oregon, and I had been back for a few months after this gathering and stuff had, kind of calmed down. I mean, I had an adventure just getting back here, right, to Oregon from that from the Missouri Rainbow Gathering was an incredible adventure, which is a story in itself. But I'm not going to tell that story here because it probably wouldn't be all that entertaining to most people. So I'm not going to tell it. But it was quite an adventure just getting back to Oregon. But once I got back to Oregon, I was here for just a little while, and my third son was born. And shortly after he was born, we left Central Oregon, the Rainbow Farm area, and went to Southern Oregon. And shortly after I moved to Southern Oregon, I moved into this really incredible 2-story log cabin. It was a log cabin. There was no power. The running water was off of a spring, which was half a mile away and piped into the house. We had an outhouse. There was no septic tank or any of that stuff. But this was all in those days. This was normal. Normal stuff. Log cabin, outhouse, spring water. Hey. Right? So that just happens to be also the cabin where Adam was born. He was born about a year or so later after we moved into that cabin. And I delivered him as I delivered all my other children, except for my eldest, which is why we did that. Another story. And so shortly after I moved into that cabin, a good friend of mine basically gave me a book to read. And it was the Nakamati Library, right, which was found in the same area at the same time as the Dead Sea Scrolls. I definitely recommend that people read that book because it's free. You can get it. It's under public domain, and they actually published that, right? You also have to be aware of one of the ones that published that book. They went after him for it because he released stuff that they didn't want him to release. And his name was Patterson Brown, and he's the one who translated and released into the public the Gospel of Thomas, which you can also find as a separate work. So I got the Library of Nakamati, and I'm reading this total, never really seen the Gnostic perspective on this biblical history. As I started reading this Nakamati, I started realizing that once again that this great vision that I had been given was true, and that what I read in Nakamati was confirming parts of it. So I've had almost all of it confirmed for me at this point. The Apocrypha of Adam has some things in it which also confirm what I witnessed. And so that really much, that's kind of a tiny, trivial tidbit to wrap up that story, just a final little thing to give credibility to my witness. So I hope that you guys would like to talk with me about this. I would like to do some sort of blog, but I'm not famous like Joe Rogan, and I'm not a personality. I'm not, I am a character, but I'm not, I'm not a professional. I don't do this to make a living, to get a number of hits, or to get monetized. I don't do that. That's not why I'm doing it. I'm doing it because I feel like I have to do it. Now I'm going to give you some music at some point in this thing, because that's what I do with Anecdotal Evidence. I'll provide you with some music. So I have to figure out what might be appropriate. I'm looking forward to anybody commenting and giving their opinion on whether they'd like to participate or they'd like to see more of this, and and other people and I having discussions about some of the topic and other topics like other shows that are out there. But this is going to be a little bit different. To start with, we're going to talk about what does it mean, all these stories that I've told you. It's like I tell you once again, it's not about me. So trying to interpret these stories as having something to do with me misses the point of me telling them. Okay, because telling them for the sake of me is like it's kind of funny. It's hilarious to me to think of that. All right, because it's like I have absolutely no respect for celebrity. All right, I respect somebody for the work they do and the results of their art, but I have no respect for the person of the celebrity. Glamour is just another part of the illusion to me. So, having said all that, I'll call this the end of this episode, and it may very well be the final one of Anecdotal Evidence, and unless I come back and we do some discussion with other people about some of this stuff. Of course, you're free to give me comments, and you can subscribe if you want. It's like it doesn't matter to me because it's not going to make any difference whether you subscribe unless you want to, right? And but I'll respond to comments. If I get any comments, I'll respond to them. And I'm into opening up communication, and if people want to have their questions answered or whatever about any of this, I'm definitely willing to do that. So thank you for watching, and I enjoy telling you. Have a good life. Goodbye.
The earth is our mother, the sun is our father, and we're just a few children, just one galaxy occupying you and me. Let us spiral together, swim with the stars like the fishes in the sea. There's no one there to bother us 'cause we're free. Touch your feet to the ground that you're on, and let the earth embrace you in her song. Keep an open mind and let in the light that's shining down from the sun. Help to grow the food, keep the water clean, spread the love and do what we mean. It's so beautiful right here and now. We have everything that we need. We're in it together, whether you like it or not. You can run and hide, but you'll still get what you got. It's a phenomenon, and we keeping on. It's all just the music, that's it. The earth is our mother, the sun is our father, and we're just a few children, occupying you and me. Let us spiral together, swim with the stars like the fishes in the sea. We're surely not alone out here, and all our friends come in peace. Let's dance on the Milky Way, see what we can find, travel through the cosmos in the blink of an eye. Let's skip stones across the universe, traverse through endless space, make love on an asteroid with a smile on our face. Shoo-be-doo-up, down, doo-doo-doo, shoo-be-doo-up. Shoo-be-doo-up, down, doo-doo-doo, shoo-be-doo-up, boop-bop-ba-doo-ba-da-ba-doo. Shoo-be-doo-up, down, doo-doo-doo, shoo-be-doo-up. Shoo-be-doo-up, down, ba-ba. The earth is our mother, the sun is our father, and we're just a few children, just one galaxy occupying you and me. Let us spiral